Who was Lobsang Rampa? A Tibetan monk, or an English writer called CYRIL HOSKINS? This synthese is based mainly on the detailed article written by Ajananda Bharati, a respected professor of anthropology and renowned expert of South Asian culture. Professor Bharati masters 15 classical languages, among which Sanskrit and Hindi. He has a deep understanding of the Tantric tradition, on which he published several books, was even ordained as an Hindu monk in an Indian temple, and spent his whole life studying, teaching, working, living in India plus other South Asian countries. He wrote a lot of articles in international academic reviews and ended his career in USA as Professor of South Asian Studies, where he was cited for his exceptional academic achievement. If you take a look at the Bharati's article, you will be convinced by his credentials. I am up to 95% sure that he can be trusted in his domain of expertise. In fact, Professor Bharati was one of the experts contacted by the publisher of Rampa's first book, The Third Eye, to evaluate the authenticity of the story. He concluded, without a doubt, that Rampa was an impostor ignorant of the real Tibetan religion, who knew very few about the South Asian culture in general. Professor Bharati reached that conclusion after reading only the 2 first pages of the manuscript. Nevertheless, the editor Frederick Warburg decided to publish the book. Soon after this first publication, a mediatic war began and lasted a few years, between in one camp known experts like Professor Bharati, the former English ambassador in Tibet Hugh Richardson, HEINRICH HARRER alpinist explorer author of 7 Years of Adventure in Tibet, and in the other camp Lobsang Rampa alone against all, repeating that his story was entirely true. The war ended by the publication by the Daily Mail in 1958 of the conclusions of an investigation conducted by a private detective Clifford Burgess, proving that the real identity of Lobsang Rampa was CYRIL Henry Hoskins, born in 1910, in Devon, England, from English parents. Despite this serious defeat on the mediatic scene, CYRIL Hoskins never renounced to his claims, and continued writing books, narrating more impossible stories to back up his extraordinary destiny, such as communicating with cats by telepathy, seeing weak electromagnetic fields such as auras, predicting the future, flying an airplane without training, mentally controlling animals, reading people's minds, etc., etc. So much, too much exceptional powers concentrated in one man, a kind of demigod, the chosen one, who was able to survive so much, too much dangerous experiences, such as crossing half the globe without any logistic or financial support, surviving torture, visiting the planet Venus, entering a Buddhist monastery at the age of 7, becoming a medical doctor in a Chinese school, becoming a pilot in the Chinese army, receiving the testimony of a blind monk abducted by extraterrestrials, experiencing the transfer of his soul from Rampa's body into Hoskins' avatar, etc., etc. Yes, that is way too much for a single man. The probabilities of accumulating so much rare events are so low, less than 1 in a billion, that you start questioning, how can a guy be so lucky? He must be a messiah sent by God. Or, his story must be total bullshit invention. Anyone who passed the age of believing in Santa Claus will discard the messianic possibility and will prefer the bullshit option. Personally, I was still a teenager when I discarded Rampa's books as too pretty to be true. Later, under the influence of the New Age ideology, I dived into Rampa's books and his phantasmagoric world. I was dreaming like a child that all this could be true, with the help of a close friend who loves Rampa. But after a few months in dreamland, I felt down on the hard reality floor when I discovered that the Theosophical Society was a pseudo-scientific religion sharing a lot of ideas with Rampa. For sure, CYRIL Hoskins knew Madame Blavatsky's ideology very well. In his article, Professor Bharati convinced me definitively that Rampa was a liar. Bharati speaks of the Theosophical Rampaism, explaining how Blavatsky and Rampa's writings are mainly per-affabulations. Nevertheless, Hoskins seems to have saved the lives of some of the most psychological desperated teenagers, and I am sure that a few ideas from the Theosophical Rampaism will be confirmed in the current epoch of contact with extraterrestrial civilizations. We will see. To finish with CYRIL Hoskins, if he was as honest and sincere as he pretended, why did he change his name 2 times during his life, around 1958 for Karl Kuon Suo, finally around 1962 for Tuesday Lobsang Rampa? Also, why did he move to Ireland during the first mediatic contestation, 1957? Then to the east of Canada, later to Calgary in the west of Canada. He must had a lot of enemies and very few friends to move like that, while changing his name. It appears very suspicious to me. I guess money was the reason, because despite his claims of poverty, his books generated a good deal of money. For example, his bestseller first book, The Third Eye, sold more than 300,000 copies, paying back at least £20,000 to the author, which with very approximative calculation, gives £200,000 of today. Not bad, and then ought to attract a lot of beggars willing to get the part of this providential easy gain. Chronologically, one of the first serious book on the topic of the forbidden medieval obscure Tibetan microcosmos was 7 Years of Adventure in Tibet by the ex-Nazi Autrichian explorer author HEINRICH HARRER, published in 1954 in German language. The English translated version came out in 1956. The great movie, 7 Years in Tibet, got in the theaters in 1997. It is a rich but pale reflection of the incredible world depicted in the book, a retarded medieval society where the omnipresent numerous religious authorities rules every aspects of the daily life. There is no wheel, no engine, no electricity, no courant water, no drain, no telephone, no radio, no television, no printing press, no medicine, etc., etc. People are living like during the Middle Age under the dictatorship of retarded religious. Rampa's first book, The Third Eye, is published in 1958, exploiting only a small portion of the rich details reported in Harrer's book. It is probable that Hoskins studied both Harrer's and Blavatsky's writings at the public library in his town in between 1956 and 1958. His pseudonym was probably inspired by the name of the Dalai Lama's brother Lobsang Rampa described by Harrer. Finally, I shall add a few other judgments by concerned VIP. The 14th Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso, publicly declared that, even if Rampa's story is a work of fiction far different from reality, his books contributed to the popularity of Tibet across the world. Frédéric Lenoir, a French mediatic personality, author, PhD, professor of philosophy and religions history, wrote something like, "The Theosophical Tibet of Lobsang Rampa has nothing to do with the reality of Tibet." Paul-Éric Blanroux, a French writer and one of the founder of the Associative Skeptics Atheistic Circle, also declared that Rampa was an impostor, a joker, whose story is a big scam. On the other side of the ocean, in the American Far West, the killer James Randi buried Rampa deep down as a fraud in his Encyclopedia of the Paranormal. As I wrap up this investigation, I can conclude, with a 95% chances of being right, that Cyril Henry Hoskins, known as Lobsang Rampa, was a liar by declaring that his story was true. His imposture was to sell his fiction as a true story and to do so until his death. I am open to any discussion about what I said in this document.